All right, today I am joined by Joel Pollak from Breitbart News to go over some of the biggest stories. Joel, you've got so much going on. Your family lived through the Palisade fires. You're dealing with California Governor Newsom, Karen Bass. How are you doing? I know that you've got so much going on right now.
I'm doing fine. It's just extremely busy. So much going on, as you say, personal stuff, political stuff, lots going on. So it's a juggling act even more than it's ever been, but we're doing fine.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that you guys are okay. First question. Democrat election expert James Carville said Trump hasn't accomplished much in his first 30 days and believes the government will collapse 30 more days from now. Is this guy completely out of touch?
It sounds like it because Trump has secured the border. I mean, I'm hearing reports that there are no illegal aliens crossing in certain parts of the border where there were thousands of illegal aliens crossing under Biden. So there's that. There's also DOJ cutting billions of dollars of waste from the federal government. There's also forcing Ukraine and Russia to the negotiating table and backing up Israel and making sure there's a ceasefire that works, however imperfectly. I mean, so much improvement in such a short period of time, signing executive orders on everything from transgenderism in sports to trade relations with other countries, getting Canada and Mexico to agree to help stop the flow of fentanyl. I mean, the guy's on fire. He's doing everything that his supporters wanted and expected him to do, and he's doing even more.
Okay. I mean, maybe this is why James Carville backed Kamala Harris. I mean, to me, he just seems so out of touch. He used to be, have a pulse on America, Bill Clinton.
James Carville is a guy who plays two roles. The first role is he tries to shape his party's strategy, and the second is he comments on politics. So you can never tell when he's actually being objective and analytical or when he's trying to drive a political message. And the idea that Trump has achieved nothing is just not correct. I mean, there's a Harvard-Harris poll out today that shows that 58% of American voters prefer Trump to Biden, and that Democratic Party approval is at an all-time low of 36%. So that's the reality he's facing, that the Democrats haven't done anything since January 20th. I mean, what have they done to oppose him? They've gone to court a few times. They can't figure out what to do, and everything they do is alienating the American public even more. So he's trying to change that by saying Trump's failing, Trump's not doing anything. I don't think that narrative is going to stick, and the Democrats are still looking for a way to oppose him. The problem is that he's doing things that are broadly popular. I mean, cutting government waste and cutting USAID, the Democrats are upset about it, but that's broadly popular with the American public.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, speaking of transgender issues, comedian Bill Mahr went on a podcast this week and said Democrats will continue to lose every election going forward if they do not leave this hill of fighting for trans kids. He said nothing unites a group of parents more than somebody trying to confuse their child about their sexual gender or orientation. Do you agree with this? And if so, why are Democrats so stuck on this trans issue?
Democrats are stuck on the issue because Democrats have a self-identification as the party of civil rights. And the transgender issue has become the symbol of that. We've had civil rights in this country, civil rights legislation since the 1960s, even before that, actually. But for the last 50 or 60 years, there have been no real civil rights issues as far as race is concerned. The Black Lives Matter movement tried to make a big deal out of policing, but all that really ended up doing was making cities more dangerous, including for Black residents. So there really is no other civil rights issue. You could say that school choice is a civil rights issue, but that's one for conservatives because Democrats will never abandon the unions, the teachers' unions in particular. So the transgender issue has become the way the Democratic Party tells itself that it's still fighting for civil rights, even though it only affects a tiny proportion of the population. It's become an important symbol for uniting the Democratic Party. That's why they cling to it. They know they're the good guys because they're on the side of civil rights, even if it means violating the rights of parents, violating the rights of children. And Bill Maher is right. He said this has really gone outside of reasonable boundaries. You cannot tell a child what gender they are. Children have no idea which end is up. You have no way to enforce through drugs or surgery or school policy or whatever a kind of march toward a genderless future. It's cruel, and it does unite parents. So it's not that the issue itself is so cataclysmic, but it does unite the opposition. It's a small issue that Democrats place way too much emphasis on, and the result is that it unites people around the Republicans.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I could understand from a civil rights perspective, let's help trans or gender confused adults. But when you start going after elementary age school children, sneaking behind parents' backs, trying to get them access to hormone blockers and different things, I just think even for liberals, for many of them, it's gone too far. Is this why the approval rating among Democrats is at an all-time low?
I think the approval rating is at an all-time low because Democratic voters who want better opposition aren't seeing it. So we're a 50-50 country. Generally, half the country will support Republicans, half will support Democrats. And sometimes when voters are feeling upset with their own parties, you'll see the approval rating drop even more. And I think that's what's happened here. It's not that you have large numbers of Democrats suddenly supporting Donald Trump. I think there is some movement in that direction, but it's not accounting for the full movement that we're seeing. What we're seeing in the polls is a result of Democrats expressing their frustration with their own party. They want someone to stand up to Trump, even if they like what Trump is doing. They just like to see vigorous opposition. And right now, the Democrats aren't providing it. They look rather weak. And I think weakness also inspires disapproval. So that's what's happening.
Okay. You wrote a book, The Agenda, What Trump Should Do in His First 100 Days. You've already mentioned so many things he's accomplished. Are there any on your list of 100 that you are still looking forward to him bringing legislation or executive action?
Yeah, there are many of them. Again, as you mentioned, he's done so much already. And there are proposals in my book like the Sovereign Wealth Fund that he did very early on. I did not expect him to do that so quickly. He did it very quickly. So I'm very pleased with that. I do think the Ukraine-Russia peace deal is taking longer than I expected, but that's not because of Trump. That's because of Ukraine. And I would like to see the expansion of the Abraham Accords. Although, I have to say Trump has done so much to return to a pro-Israel path that you can't really fault him for the fact that some things are taking a little bit longer. I'd like to see the Department of, it's called the Environmental Protection Agency. I'd like to see that renamed the Department of Conservation. That's one of my suggestions. That hasn't happened yet. I'd like him to do that. You might think, well, a name doesn't really matter. It does actually matter because the fact that the EPA has a different name makes it different than other government departments. People see it as somehow overarching and far-reaching, and it really is just one department. And saying that you're protecting the environment orients you toward this philosophy of creating a pristine natural world, which just is a fiction. Human beings have to coexist within nature. We need to use nature. We need to use trees. We need to use animals. We need to use fossil fuels. We have a relationship with our natural surroundings that is one of use. It doesn't have to be one of abuse. It has to be one of cultivation, where we cultivate natural resources. That's a conservation ethic. That's not environmental protection. So I'd like to see the department renamed and the philosophical orientation of the department changed. It should be the Department of Conservation. Administrator Lee Zeldin should just be Secretary Zeldin. He should be the Secretary of Conservation.
Okay, interesting. Let's go back just for a minute. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand the Sovereign Wealth Fund. How is that different than just government spending approved by Congress? And who has the authority over that sovereign fund?
So the idea came to me because I was trying to come up with ways that Trump could reduce the national debt in the first 100 days. How do you do that unless you get congressional legislation? I do talk about congressional legislation in the last chapter of my book, but my goal was to write a series of ideas that Trump could do without having to negotiate with Congress within his constitutional executive authority. And creating a sovereign wealth fund is one of them. It doesn't require spending by the government. It just requires the government to open an account, essentially, and take assets that the government is holding and to invest them differently. Why is this important? Because we have seen our politicians fail time and time again to reduce the national debt. Nobody wants to cut spending. But one way to decrease your overall level of indebtedness is to increase your assets. We only check the liabilities. We're not looking at the assets. We have huge assets in this country. And so my idea was, let's build up an asset stock that we can count against the liabilities. That would help us, in a sense, reduce the net debt burden. It's not going to reduce the amount we owe, but it's going to reduce the net negative. You balance the liabilities against the assets. So if we have some national assets that are growing, that are generating a return, in a sense, you move part of the way towards solving the debt problem. And other countries do have sovereign wealth funds. Saudi Arabia has one. I think Norway has one. These are funds used by these governments to invest, to create wealth for their residents, and sometimes for their rulers and so forth. It's typically done in oil-rich countries where they have massive amounts of revenues. They have more money than they know what to do with, so they create these investment funds. There are some pitfalls. We don't want the government to pick winners and losers in the marketplace. But at the same time, why not develop some kind of asset stock? I mean, Trump talks about visiting Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. We need to make sure that we have more and more assets that are growing, that are active, that can do good things. And that's the idea behind the Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you helping me better understand that. Okay, one more strange Democrat question, then I want to talk about California. The governor of Wisconsin is trying to change the law that you can no longer use the word mother. He wants mothers to be referred to as inseminated persons. How offensive is this? And are women nothing more than a semen receptacle under his definition? Like, why get rid of mother? Motherhood is so important in a society.
It's just lunacy, and it shows you they've learned nothing from 2024. I mean, people don't want to abandon the English language. Nobody voted for that. And you have a Supreme Court justice nominated by Biden, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who can't tell you what a woman is, and yet Democrats were all excited in the last election about the first female president. So either gender matters or it doesn't. I think it matters to people, but people also want to transcend it and just live as human beings. I don't think you get anyone closer to that by changing words and their meanings. It's sort of preposterous.
Yeah. All right. Another confusing thing. This might sound like a Babylon Bee satire post, but I read that Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles is now launching an investigation into why she was allowed to go to Africa while her city was on fire. Have you heard anything about that? And how crazy is that? Are you overwhelmed by back taxes or unfiled tax returns? The IRS is cracking down, hiring 20,000 new agents to issue millions of pay up or else notices in 2025. Don't face the IRS alone. Use my friends at Tax Network USA. They are here to help. As the nation's premier tax relief firm, Tax Network USA has negotiated over $1 billion in tax relief. Our experts specialize in penalty forgiveness, hardship programs where you might not owe anything until your tax debt expires, and lump sum settlements through offers in compromise. Whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, they have a solution. Even if you're behind due to missing records, their team will guide you through the process. The IRS is a collection machine. Do not get trapped in it. Use Tax Network USA. Do not call the IRS alone. Instead, call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Gardner for a free consultation today.
Well, I'm sure that's not how she described the investigation. I mean, there are several investigations going on right now into the fire, but I think she's trying to cast that as the reason she left and wasn't in town, trying to blame the fire chief and the fire department, saying they didn't warn her adequately and so forth. She's undermining herself with these rather desperate actions to deflect responsibility. And I think that even though I thought she'd survive through to the end of her term, I'm beginning to have my doubts because I think she's irritating people so much that she may actually have to step down. in attempting to avoid accountability, she may find herself stripped of all power.
Okay. Speaking of power, President Trump consulted with her and exhorted her to use her authority as a government leader to get more done. She said that she would, and that people would be able to start rebuilding right away. Now, this morning, I'm reading that they may block people from even breaking ground on rebuilding for 5 years. Have you heard anything about that?
They're not going to block people from rebuilding for 5 years. I hadn't heard anything about that. She is saying it could take 5 years to rebuild. That's not a crazy estimate, but it's not an inspiring one either. But they're not blocking people. They are incompetent. And right now, one of the problems people are having is it's become very difficult to move debris out of the Pacific Palisades because the city and the county haven't figured it out yet. So there's debris removal happening, but where's the debris going to go? Where are the trucks going to go? We don't really know. So there's been some debris removal. It's encouraging to people, but there are little problems that are going to come up like this all along the way. I think the Palisades could start to look more normal in a couple of years, even 2 to 3 years. So I think it's going to be okay, but she doesn't know how to inspire that kind of confidence. It's only because people believe so hard and want so badly to rebuild the community that it's going to happen. It's not because the mayor said this or that. And she's definitely not going to block it. Nobody's going to block it. Nobody is going to block the rebuilding of Pacific Palisades. It's happening.
Okay. Final question. I appreciate you coming on so much. On the one hand, Gavin Newsom has a $50 million fund to fight Donald Trump. On the other hand, he's begging Donald Trump for $40 billion to rebuild. I guess as someone in Utah, I don't understand the thinking there.
The thinking is they can have it both ways because they always have. They've been able to get money from the federal government and then do whatever they want. And this time is different. First of all, it's Trump 2.0. It's not Trump 1.0. He's not just trying to look like he's getting along with people. Trump has a unique opportunity to impose changes on the way California governs itself. And he's talked about imposing voter ID and things like that. But more than that, I think we need water management that makes sense, forestry that makes sense, better emergency services, better leadership. Trump can make conditions that California has to abide if it's going to get that money. Conditions just like Gavin Newsom makes. I mean, Gavin Newsom has been threatening all kinds of local governments here in California. If you don't follow my affordable housing policy, if you don't follow my homeless policy, you're not getting funding. If you don't put LGBTQ plus curricula in your textbooks, you're not getting education funding. He doesn't care what happens to children or what happens to these communities. He then says, well, it would be politicizing the issue to cut off funds from California for the fires just because you don't like our policy on X or Y. No, that's what Newsom does. Newsom does exactly that to local communities. So you know what? It works. It works. You twist people's arms. They need the money. So Gavin Newsom is going to have to accept some changes in how California is governed. And hopefully Trump and the Republicans in Congress will impose a special master on all the federal spending that they're probably going to send so that you have a responsible person watching every penny, so that it's actually used to rebuild and to help victims of the fire and not used to build Olympic stadiums or trains to nowhere. Gavin Newsom is not going to get away with this. And spending $50 million to fight Trump while you're asking him to sign $40 billion over to you is just asking for punishment. And I do hope the Trump administration comes down hard and says, no, that is the old way of doing things. It's not going to fly anymore.
Okay, great. I know you got a lot going on. Joel, thank you so much for coming on. I'm going to put direct links to your Breitbart articles down below and your X account as well. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Steve. I really appreciate it. And sorry I couldn't stay longer. Just so much is happening right now.